Hey, what is going on, Frag fam? I hope you guys are all doing well today. Elliot here, and welcome back to The Fragrance Well. I'm gonna have a little bit of fun today. We're gonna talk about fragrance types and fragrance levels in terms of, I'm gonna categorize it as appeals to the most people versus appeals to the least amount of people. And I'm gonna use video game difficulty levels to kind of help me with that. We're gonna go from easy to medium to hard to very hard to God mode / impossible mode / die once, you got to start the whole game over mode. Easy is going to correlate to fragrances that can appeal to the most people, and then God mode is going to be fragrances that appeal to the least amount of people. You could kind of think of this as a wearability scale. The thing about that is, depending on where you're from culturally in terms of what is more normal in terms of scent with your culture, this could change. So I do need to point out that I am basing this off of smells in the United States in particular. And this is also going to be my experience in terms of what I consider to be easy to wear or easily accessible or easily acceptable for a lot of people versus what is a little bit more difficult. So I've got 2 fragrances for each of those difficulty ratings, whatever you want to call them. So we got 10 fragrances total. So let's go ahead and get right into it. But before we do, as always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you do like the content, and please hit that bell icon and enable notifications so you can be notified when I upload new videos. Let's get into it. All right, so we're gonna start off with easy mode. These are fragrances that I think can appeal to the most people overall. There are a lot of fragrances that can do this. I just chose 2 that give me that vibe when I wear them or out of my collection. So first up is gonna come from Chanel. This is gonna be Allure Homme Sport Superleggera. Chanel Allure Homme Sport Superleggera. Now, if you think about the Allure Homme Sport line, it's a fragrance DNA in general that appeals to a lot of people. It's very easy to wear. This one in particular, I kind of see as a reimagining of the original Allure Homme Sport. A little bit more bare, a little bit more modern. It's a little bit more straightforward, not as creamy overall. This one is citrus in the form of like mandarin. It's a little bit watery, a little bit aromatic and clean. Very clean woods, very fresh. Definitely indicative of a sport fragrance. Scents like this appeal to a lot of people, whether you're wearing them or whether other people are smelling you. If it's fresh, if it's clean, it makes you smell, in terms of a men's scent, makes you smell fresh, clean, and masculine. Typically, this is stuff that appeals to most people. So that's why I consider this an easy wear, or should I say an easy fragrance in terms of who this will appeal to. It will appeal to a lot of people. Now, whether or not they want to buy this one in particular is irrelevant. I'm just giving an example. It's more about the type of fragrance, not necessarily the fragrance exactly. So once again, from Chanel, this one here is Allure Homme Sport Superleggera. All right, guys, the next easy fragrance is going to come from Paco Rabanne, and this is Invictus Parfum. Paco Rabanne Invictus Parfum. A little bit of a side note here. If anybody has ever heard me talk about my thoughts on Invictus in general, you may be shocked to see that I have an Invictus fragrance in my collection. I'm going to do a full review on this, so we'll go into more of that later. That's not really the point of this video. That being said, we know Invictus in general appeals to a lot of people. A little bit different from the Allure Homme Sport. This is more of the sweet and enjoyable, easy to wear, kind of youthful, playful scent DNA that is very prominent in the fragrance marketplace, if you will. I just happen to like this one more than the other Invictus. That's why I have this one in particular, but it does kind of have all of that. It's a little bit fresh, a little bit clean, but mostly sweet. The sweetness of this one is at a level I actually can tolerate. But yeah, we know Invictus and other fragrances that kind of play on that type of fragrance do very, very well, particularly here in the modern day fragrance business marketplace, if you will. If you just want to look at Paco Rabanne, they also have 1 Million, certainly one of the most successful fragrance lines that does that very same thing, but in a slightly different character. So yes, fragrances like this, they appeal to a lot of people, so they're easy in terms of that categorization of fragrances. So once again, from Paco Rabanne, this is Invictus Parfum. All right, the next categorization is going to be medium, and the way I'm going to categorize these is They still can appeal to a lot of people, but in terms of the scent DNA, it's just a little bit less mainstream, if you will. Pushes it a little bit, but still very likable. First one's gonna come from Narciso Rodriguez. This is Bleu Noir for him, Eau de Parfum. Narciso Rodriguez, Bleu Noir for him, Eau de Parfum. If you're familiar with this scent, you could think of this as a different take on a Bleu de Chanel, if you will. Doesn't smell like Bleu de Chanel, but it kind of walks the same lines in terms of being a blue fragrance where it's woody, it's fresh and clean. This one makes use of a variety of woods to give off a freshness, but it's basically a woody fragrance and a musky fragrance. Really uses a good amount of musk to add to the softness of the fragrance, but it's this collection of woody notes that provide woodiness, cleanliness, and freshness. I love the way this stuff smells. Definitely gives me a very different take on a blue scent DNA that I really, really like, but it's not mainstream. Not many fragrances out here do what this one does, but it is still something that is very easy to wear and very appealing to a large number of people. So once again, from Narciso Rodriguez, this one here is Bleu Noir for him, Eau de Parfum. All right, the second medium fragrance is gonna come from Rare Oud Parfums. This is Elysium Parfum. Rare Oud Parfums Elysium. You might hear some people say this is like a niche version of a blue fragrance DNA. I can agree with that to some extent. This fragrance is citruses with a slight apple fruity touch, very slight, a collection of aromatic notes, giving it a somewhat cleanliness, but aromatic cleanliness, and then a very balanced collection of woody notes, musky notes, not overly sweet, but it is fresh and clean and very citrus dominant. It's a scent DNA that you can absolutely use for anything, so that's why it kind of falls into that blue fragrance category. And again, definitely a very appealing scent to a wide variety of people, but pushes the envelope a little bit in terms of familiarity, in terms of a scent DNA. If you think about some of the fragrances that Rare Oud Parfums has, they definitely don't fall into that, likable category for a wide variety of people. I'm not saying they're difficult to wear, but that's just not really what those fragrances are, where Elysium kind of steps outside of that norm, if you will. Many would probably still consider Elysium to be the most likable scent DNA from a house like Rare Oud Parfums, but also not very typical. So that's why I put it into the medium likability slash acceptability category. So once again, from Rare Oud Parfums, this one here is Elysium Parfum. All right, guys, so we're gonna move on to the hard category. These are fragrances that still have some appeal overall, but less people would probably spend their money on them and buy them or wear them. First one's gonna come from Marc-Antoine Barras, and this is Ganymede. Marc-Antoine Barras, Ganymede. Now, when this fragrance first came out, this might have made it into a more difficult category to appeal to people. Fact of the matter is, the Ganymede DNA has kind of cemented itself as a newer scent style that appeals to more people, but not necessarily everybody. The interesting thing about the Ganymede DNA, though, is that there's other versions of it, Bois Imperial in particular, and some inspirational fragrances that are easier to wear than Ganymede itself. So for myself, I put this in hard category, but it's still a likable DNA, but just not to as many people as some of the ones that I talked about before this. This fragrance here, suede, leathery feel, very fresh and ozonic, a little bit of a watery, mineralic characteristic. It's a little bit dry with woody notes, has a mandarin orange slash burnt sugary kind of vibe to it. You know, this is my favorite fragrance in my cabinet at this time. Certainly turned a lot of heads to inspire some other versions of it, and those maybe appeal to a little bit more people, as I already discussed. But I think for Ganymede specifically, kind of falls into the hard category, where it is likable to a lot of people, but maybe not the overwhelming majority, but still not difficult to wear, if you will. So once again, from Marc-Antoine Barras, this is Ganymede. All right, the next one in the hard category is gonna be coming from Chris Collins, and this is African Rooibos. Chris Collins, African Rooibos. Now, interestingly enough, African Rooibos is one of Chris Collins' most successful fragrances, but I don't think it's necessarily the easiest fragrance to wear in his category or his catalog of fragrances. All that being said, this is a wonderful tea fragrance that is based around Rooibos tea, which is native to South Africa, if I'm not mistaken. It's quite spicy and dry, features a lot of spicy notes going along with the tea, and really, really dried woods. I think the stuff smells absolutely wonderful. It wears very well. Typically, if someone gets their nose on this and they're not familiar with it, I think they will find it favorable. But will the majority of people necessarily spend their money and buy this or wear it? I don't think so. That being said, I don't think it's a hard fragrance to wear, but when you think about fragrances that are tea-based and have a more smoky kind of autumn time vibe to them, a little bit not necessarily as fresh as something, say, like Imagination or Aquamedia Cologne Forte, where it's a more of a fresher take on tea, or even Nishane's Oolong Cha, I think that appeals to less people than those fragrances do. So that's why I put this one in the hard likability slash acceptability category. But this is still a wonderful fragrance that I think when people smell, they will enjoy it. So once again, from Chris Collins, this is African Rooibos. All right, guys, so the next category is going to be very hard fragrances. To me, at their best, these fragrances are 50-50 in terms of who likes them and who doesn't like them. That's at their best, which means the majority of people are not going to go for these fragrances. So to kick it off, we got one from Maison Crivelli, and this is gonna be Patchouli Magnetik. Maison Crivelli Patchouli Magnetik. Now, when I say 50-50, this one is the epitome of that concept. If you look at the fragrance ratings on this, for this on Parfumo.net, it's basically 50-50. I imagine it is probably the same on Fragrantica. I haven't looked at it on Fragrantica in terms of the rating, but this one is literally a like it, or sorry, it's not even a like it. It's either you love it or you hate it. My wife, not a big fan of this. I actually love this fragrance. I told the story of how her friend, one of her best friends, got their nose on this and she absolutely loved it. So it is literally a love it or hate it scent. But this one I wouldn't put into the hardest category, mainly because of what's in here. This is kind of an artificial peachy fragrance. It's featuring patchouli, which patchouli is a very heavily used note in fragrances, and there's plenty that use it at the forefront and they are more likable. But the way this one does it, it's kind of 50-50. To me, it's very, very leafy, not overly chocolatey, not quite as earthy as some versions of patchouli, but it's very, very leafy, mixing with that peach and just sweet notes. I mean, it's just insanely sweet. It's insanely powerful. That may be one of the reasons it's kind of a 50-50 scent, is because it slaps you across the face in terms of how powerful it is. But yeah, this is definitely one that kind of moves into the realm of likability and acceptability, where a majority of people actually are not gonna go for it. The reason I waited to very hard to start talking about fragrances like that is that I think the majority of fragrances people actually think smell good. It's just a matter of will they actually buy them or not. The very hard category is where now a lot of people may say, like, no, this does not smell good to me. So the fragrances I have in the very hard category and the God mode impossible category are ones that I think a majority of people actually would not enjoy. So that's why we started off with this one. So once again, from Maison Crivelli, this is Patchouli Magnetik. Okay, and the next one in the very hard category is coming from Xerjoff, and this is Kemi. Xerjoff Kemi. So this one I also think could be 50-50. It doesn't really have that rating on Fragrantica or Parfumo, mainly because this is not the original bottling of this. This was originally Kemi blend. And then I don't know if they were always affiliated with Xerjoff, but Xerjoff kind of repackaged them into this K collection. So that's what this is. And most people just probably aren't even familiar or have gotten their nose on this. So it has a positive rating as a result on Parfumo, not as well known as that Patchouli Magnetik is. But I would imagine in terms of most people, they probably go 50-50 at best with this. Why? It's a very, very sweet fragrance, but all of that sweetness, that candied, sugary sweetness that this has, is blended with literal fecal oud and civet and castoreum and stuff like that. So it's like funky, poopy smelling notes mixing with sugary caramel sweet notes, which is very, very odd. Now, to me, the blend is perfect. The sweetness kind of takes the forefront. It's more so if you spray this super heavy or like smell it close to the skin, especially when you first spray it, that's where those fecal notes, animalic notes really come out. But all of that really settles down after a couple of minutes, and in the air, that's not how it smells. But some people are just not gonna be able to look past that. They may not want those kind of things on their skin at all. So that's why I say this is the very hard category. Once again, from Xerjoff, this one here is Kemi. All right, guys, so the final category, we're gonna call it God mode. These are fragrances that are going to appeal to the least amount of people. Does that mean these fragrances smell bad? They can, but that's not really what I'm gonna present here in the video, because I'm not gonna have a fragrance that I just think smells horrible presented in a video or in my collection. If it does smell bad in that way, it's probably more of a quality thing. I'm not really talking about quality here, I'm talking about the fragrance DNA. So first up is coming from Nishane, and this is Sultan Vetiver. Nishane Sultan Vetiver. So I think this stuff is masterful. I think this is a vetiver fragrance for kings, but it is not going to appeal to most people. The main reason is this collection of florals in here that are very, very powdery, and also absinthe. This fragrance has a little bit of a dated smell to it. If you've ever had your grandmother wear a perfume and it's just heavy on the florals and kind of bright and vibrant and almost have this aldehyde kind of smell to it, this fragrance has a little bit of that in here. It has a little bit of that characteristic to it, which is gonna turn a lot of people off. This is not a scent for everyone. I think it's something that people who really appreciate vetiver will have, and also appreciate kind of that old world style floral nature will have. That being said, I've actually been complimented on this fragrance, which blew my mind. I never thought I would wear this and get compliments, but even for me, it's not one I'm gonna reach for a lot. This is more so something I just simply appreciate and want in my collection for that reason, but it's not gonna get a whole lot of wears out of me, and I know for a fact that this is not one of Nishane's best sellers. And I certainly know that it is a fragrance DNA that just does not appeal to the majority of people. It's gonna appeal to a smaller subset of people that appreciate stuff like this. Once again, from Nishane, this is Sultan Vetiver. All right, and the final fragrance that's gonna be featured in the video, as well as the God mode category, this is from Arabian Oud, and it is the Rare Oud. Arabian Oud, the Rare Oud. Now, I already talked about an oud fragrance that does have some fecal characteristics. This actually does not have any of that. It is not a fecal oud whatsoever. The fragrance is basically Thai oud, and that's it. It actually comes in raw oil form as well. Sometimes I think I should have just got that. They're around the same price, but I opted for the fragrance, and I'm not complaining about it. But this is basically a fragrance, in my opinion, that strictly appeals to people that have an interest in oud in general, which is not going to be the majority of people, particularly here in the States. Now, in other parts of the world, it might be the complete opposite with a fragrance like this. But in the States, most people are not going to really care for this, or certainly not spend their money on it. But what is it, by the way? Again, it's just Thai oud, but it has its own note breakdown. Has a spicy characteristic that I kind of picture as similar to cardamom and coriander, and maybe a touch of cinnamon. It's very, very resinous in nature, kind of has this woody plant-like characteristic. It even has a little bit of like a natural nectar-like sweetness to it. And that's the fragrance, but that's coming from one ingredient as far as this fragrance is concerned. The thing about it is, when people smell this, they may think it smells interesting, but it's not something they're gonna be like, oh, I gotta have that, I gotta wear that. Many might even think like, this is a fragrance? It's interesting, but it's weird. Many people are just gonna find it weird. So that's why I put this in the God mode category, because even myself, it's not something I'm gonna wear on a daily basis. It's not something I'm gonna wear very, very often. It's gonna be something I wear when I'm just kind of in the mood for it. And I really appreciate a fragrance like this, so it's more of a collector piece than it is something I plan to get a whole lot of wear out of. Which is a good thing, because even though the bottle looks like it could hold 100 mils or 50, this is only 30 milliliters of juice, and it is very expensive for that 30 milliliters. I don't think it's meant to be worn a ton. But I certainly appreciate something like this, but most people are not going to. That's why I put it in God mode in terms of likability and acceptability. So once again, from Arabian Oud, this is the Rare Oud. All right, guys, that is gonna do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the concept I put on this. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with some of these fragrances, if you're familiar with them, where I placed them in terms of likability, and feel free to put together your own list. You might have plenty of experience with fragrances that you would kind of tear off in terms of how people would like them versus not like them. Would love to see what you guys have to say. Thanks again for watching all the way into the end. I really do appreciate you all. Please remember to be well and smell well. And I'll see you all in the next episode of The Fragrance Well. Have a good one.